everybody. Glad you tuned in to be with me, Pastor Tony, to talk about public health principles that are found in the Bible. Many have been the attempts of civil rights activists these days to broadcast the hazards of public health practices to individual rights. Mask mandates and forced vaccinations and required quarantining are viewed by these as jeopardizing their sacred right as American citizens. Some Christians consider it a denial of their faith to practice tried and true health practices because they believe God is my protector and healer. You've probably heard this. You may have said this before. But give yourself permission for just a moment to take a small step away from this line of thinking and step rather into a biblical world where God thought otherwise. In the Bible, you have many of the same public health practices being promoted back then, which civil rights activists today decry. Practices that didn't contradict faith in God, but were a natural outgrowth of that faith, as people were to put their faith in God's instruction. For example, in Leviticus chapters 13 and 14, you have many health practices introduced to prevent the spread of the communicable disease, leprosy. Take Leviticus 13:45, where lepers were to wear face coverings in public to prevent the spread of their disease. Face coverings, way back in biblical times. Go figure. Or the practice of physical distancing. In Leviticus 13, verses 45 and 46, lepers were to cry out, "Unclean, unclean," in public while they were in public, which provided clean people an opportunity to put distance between themselves and the one infected. It kind of flies in the face of one's right to privacy when it comes to health matters, doesn't it? You see, biblically, one's privacy was sacrificed the moment it affected the well-being of others. Also, when a healed leper was to be checked by the priest in Leviticus 14:3, the inspection was to take place out of the camp to prevent any potential spread of the disease, even if healing was anticipated. The health principle is infected until proven well. You also have the principle of quarantining expressed in the same chapter, Leviticus 13, verses 4, 5, 46, and elsewhere in the Bible. A 1 to 2 week quarantine was required until symptoms cleared. Admittedly, quarantining healthy people is not a practice promoted in the Bible, but in the pandemic, where for several days a person can be highly contagious prior to symptoms presenting, some felt a case could be made to quarantine everyone for a brief period of time. Either way, the idea here is if symptoms do appear, presume you are infectious until proven otherwise, and take necessary precautions like masks and quarantine and physical distancing and so on. In Exodus 30, you have the practice of hand washing by the priests, verses 18 to 21. Hand washing was a part of worship and eating rituals in the Old Testament, and served a public health purpose as well. Preventing spread through second-hand contact is addressed in Leviticus 13, verses 47 to 59. This law was designed to prevent the spread of a disease through contact with common items like clothing or household items and the such. It could apply to any item sick persons that come in contact with, as these can become secondary sources of contamination. Then you had in Leviticus 13, verses 3 to 5, and verses 14 to 17, and many other places in the Old Testament, the need to get cleared before returning to public life. It was not left up to the individual to determine when they could return to public life. Lepers were to be examined and sometimes re-examined by the priest and determined clean by stringent public health standards, and only when the priest gave the all clear could the individual return to public life. And then you had the use of preventive remedies found all over the Bible. In Leviticus 14, verses 26 to 29, essential oils were used by the priest when contacting infectious people. Luke 23, verse 56 mentions herbs and spices, and again, fragrant oils being used to embalm the dead for the purpose of preventing the spread of disease and to minimize the odor. Specific herbal remedies, there are hundreds of them, but specific ones might include treatment of mandrake for infertility in the book of Genesis, or balm for sores in Jeremiah, and figs for boils in Isaiah, and hundreds of other examples could be cited. All these principles were considered common sense approaches to treating and preventing the spread of disease, yet needed to be articulated and codified to prevent an ignorant populace. To take a stance against these practices today is to discount divinely revealed remedies and to contradict clear principles spelled out for us in the Bible. It jeopardizes one's own health and the health of others, and impacts not only one's physical health, but spiritual life as well. I felt it important here in this time when we are not requiring masks, when we are not requiring physical distancing, we are not asking people to follow these practices because it isn't as urgent as it has been, that I would have the opportunity to address the attitude behind opposition to these biblical measures to prevent the spread of a disease. I hope this gives you the opportunity to rethink your position, and if you have to eat crow. Now, I understand eating crow is considered unclean in the Bible standard of dietary practices, but you know what I mean. To humble ourselves, to admit we were wrong, to be as vociferous about the truth as we were about the misinformation, to apologize where necessary, and to make restitution if we have done others harm. I want to lay this on your heart and pray that you will take it up in the Lord's name and be a light again in your world. God bless you as you do this.